This has been scoshed. I think it's still too loud.
Even after you scoshed it?
Even after I scoshed it.
You might have to do additional scoshing. And you can scosh and then like de-scosh. You can kind of go back and forth on the scosh scale just to find the right scoshing.
Okay, I'm stopping it. Recording.
I feel like I definitely have, I don't know, like my brain gets into this slightly different mode. Like I don't think I'm a performative person, and I don't think I'm really performative per se on the podcast.
Please get to the point.
But I just, like that. Like I don't know if I would have done that in a regular conversation. I don't know. I just feel like my brain gets into a slightly different
podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I ham it up.
You do.
That's not true. It's slight. It's a skosh of performativeness.
Just, can you do the show?
Well, the first part of the show, actually, before we even banter, so we shouldn't even have been bantering there, because the first thing I wanted to do was just update us on where we are, because...
Shouldn't we introduce what the show is?
What? Cults are just weird. I'm Chris.
I'm here. I'm Kayla.
You're Kayla. And we talk about cults and shit on this show. Cults are maybe not, and cults aren't even real, so we're very confused, but this is the show. So...
You guys know the deal at this point.
Right. But before we go into, like I said, into banter, I do want to talk about current events.
We're not going to banter after that.
Because we are absolutely going to banter after that, because I have a piece of banter that has been sitting on my plate that I've been forgetting to banter with you about. So we're so going to banter.
So we're going to do banter topic?
Yeah, we're going to be all over. I just said that we're a confused podcast, Kayla.
Okay.
Anyway, because we are talking about QAnon in this episode, in our previous 2 episodes, which stretched back to before the election, and in our next 2 episodes, we are basically dealing with a topic that is like changing rapidly by the day.
Yeah, we either timed this perfectly or
terribly.
Stupidly.
Or both. I think it was both.
Also, you just said the next 2 episodes.
Bad. Yes. There's 2 more.
Including this?
No.
So yeah, so we should tell our listeners.
Didn't we say that last time?
I don't know. We added another episode, y'all.
Yeah, it's too much stuff.
It's going to be a 5-episode series.
We said 4 initially, so we lied. Again, hitting it back on the confusion theme. We are confused.
We're going to close out the season by talking about QAnon.
Yeah, no, we had really planned on it being 4. Like, we had a whole, I have the paper right here. We had this whole plan for what we were going to do. And then as we dug into it, and actually a lot of it had to do with as we talked to the people that we talked to, we were like,
right.
There's too much content. And not only is there too much, there was like enough thematic difference between the things that we were getting.
Right.
That we said, actually, we're cramming too much stuff into one. We need to break it into 2.
We got to keep going. We got to stretch it.
Anyway, we are talking about all of this stuff as it's unfolding. So let's just do a quick update of where we're at. It is currently Sunday, November 22nd, 2020, as we record this. The current state of the election is that it has been a few weeks since the race has been called semi-unofficially, whatever you want to call it, for Biden. It's been called. There's dispute over, it's not official until the electors say it is. But literally every time we have an election, when it becomes obvious enough, the normal communication outlets that we have in the media call it a certain way, and that has already happened, except that Trump has not conceded yet. And he is still making challenges in courts. I think as of today, his record was Team Trump. His lawyers are 2-32 in his challenges. So 2 have gotten some traction and 32 of them have been either dismissed or thrown out or dismissed with prejudice.
There was one today with prejudice, which I don't really know anything about the law or the legal system except for when I was in mock trial in high school. But apparently that's very rarely used. Right.
And, Kayla and I want our elections to be safe and secure as much as anybody else does. But, it's November 22nd and there's been no evidence presented as yet. So that's where he is. And the way this relates back to QAnon specifically is that the QAnon community
Many in the QAnon community.
The community
don't.
Still think that Trump is going to win, and they still think that the storm is coming, and that
it's all part of
the plan. It's all part of the 52-dimensional chess. He's just stringing people along to get them to commit to their voter fraud, and then he's going to have this big reveal where everybody is arrested and all these hundreds of thousands of votes are. Some QAnoners even think that he won all 50 states in reality.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a popular QAnon election map is an entirely red United States.
That is definitely not real.
Including California, New York, Massachusetts.
Definitely not real. I also like the one where it's all of these court cases have to be lost and thrown out and whatever so that they can eventually get it to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, although that, as far as I'm aware, that is actually something that his lawyer team is saying. That's not necessarily a QAnon theory, although it's hard to distinguish now.
It is a theory that I have seen many in the Q community espouse. I'm not necessarily saying it originated there, but...
Well, that definitely came from a statement from Jenna Ellis.
I don't know much about, again, law and the legal system.
One of his big bad lawyers.
But that also doesn't seem real to me.
Yeah, so that's where we are in that, and that's what QAnon thinks about it right now. And another thing that is very QAnon related is, again, you should go listen to the Reply All episode, Country of Liars, where they talk about the identity of Q. Spoiler alert, skip the next minute of chat if you don't want to know until you go listen. But
actually, huge spoiler alert.
Huge spoiler, but we kind of have to talk about it.
We have to talk about it, but stop the podcast right now. Go listen to another podcast.
Every single time we tell people to stop listening to our podcast. That's really dumb.
But then we tell them to come back.
Anyway, spoilers, here we go. Jim Watkins, the person that owns and operates 8chan, or 8kun now, is most likely Q. And
or at least is the current iteration of Q.
Is almost certainly the current iteration of Q. It's impossible to know for sure, but they present an extremely compelling case in Reply All. Anyway... He is being interviewed on OANN, One American News Network.
His son.
Oh, pardon me. Ron Watkins. Sorry.
The other guy.
I keep getting confused.
They work together.
Ron Watkins works with his dad, Jim Watkins, who is Q.
Although probably. I think he stepped down from 8chan recently. He left it.
I don't know. It's hard to keep up, man.
It's really hard to keep up. But yeah, he's being
But the president was...
The president is retweeting clips from OANN, which...
He's done that before.
Not a reputable news source.
Right.
That interview Ron Watkins, who literally his pedigree is that he owned 8chan. That's it.
And his father is probably Q.
His father's probably Q.
And it's being retweeted by the president of the United States.
He's being retweeted as an elections expert.
Yes.
He's not, you guys.
It's not great.
He's just Q Jr.
And he owns an asshole of the internet forum website.
But again, I think he stepped down.
He may have stepped down. His father certainly is heavily involved and is also a pornographer. So, and that's it for current events.
Is it?
I think so. I mean, for us it is. We have to get to the actual content of this episode, Kayla.
Do we?
Yeah, that's it. That's our episode.
The end. Bye, guys. Go listen to Reply All.
That was easy.
No,
we're just an aggregator anyway.
We've got a whole bunch of info for you today. Or at least I don't have any info. Mr. over here has some info.
Mr. Yeah. And I think this is where we'll put our from Los Angeles. It's Sunday afternoon.
Have
cold
we
open.
Said already that Q's basically been silent through all of this?
Oh, no, I don't know if we have. Yeah, so there have been no Q drops, no Q posts.
There's been one since the election.
One since the election.
And it was very short.
A few weeks after the election. It was very short. Okay. Now cold open. Now, I said that we had to do some banter, and it's because I've been playing just the best game.
I don't want to talk about this.
And I meant to banter about it the last 2 episodes, but I totally forgot. I've been playing Hades, y'all.
You're not getting any banter out of me on
good.
This.
Why not? Why are you sick of it? You're not even playing.
That's part of why. It's like when you're out in public and somebody's having a loud cell phone conversation.
Oh my God. Every single time I'm playing.
You only hear part of it, and it's like...
I always ask, do you want me to turn the sound off? And you're like, no, it's okay.
Not every single time. Only when I'm in bed, because I need something to distract me when I'm trying to go to sleep. Otherwise, I think about all of the horrible things that are happening in life.
Then you have to stop complaining about the fact that you know exactly which musical pieces are associated with which characters despite never having played the game. Anyway, it's really good. It's for those of you that are gamers. It's a roguelite type of game where you sort of like play until you die, and there's sort of like almost no way of avoiding death. Eventually you will die, but it's just how far you can get, and then you learn and progress. And Hades has a lot of like outside progression mechanics as well, like where you can power up your character. It's all based on Greek mythology. You're trying to escape the underworld. It's really cool. I love it. And I just really wanted to banter about that. Because,
that's not banter. That's a plug. Well,
secretly, I wish that this podcast was just like a pop culture podcast anyway. That's like...
Just make a second podcast.
Oh, yeah. Just make another content suck. Yeah, that's great.
Is Hades a cult?
Almost certainly. Because we've all been, like, me and my friend group have been talking about it a whole bunch.
Yeah, just you and your friend group. Literally the entire world.
I know that, but I'm saying that I'm just using that as an example that a lot of people talk about it.
Uh-huh. Good job. It's a good game.
Of course. You know how we both do, you and I, when there's something that we really like. Whether it's like a food or a TV show or a game, we like to do our own research.
I immediately Google anything I'm, like, doing.
So I went to Google up Hades, of course, the other day to learn more about it. I went and checked out its Wikipedia page, learned a couple interesting things about its development. Then there was this hyperlink to the Wikipedia article for the actual Greek mythological realm of Hades. So I was like, I kind of want to know more about that. So I clicked on that, as you do on Wikipedia.
Of course.
Then, of course, I was reading the article about the Greek underworld, and how could I not click on the link to Christian views on Hades? How could I not click on that article?
Yeah, no, of course.
So that article is fascinating, of course. It talked about, among other things, the ways in which the Christian views of heaven and hell are shaped by the Greek mythology of Hades, how it diverged into the reward-based heaven and the punishment-based hell, for example. Super fascinating. Then I had to click on the link to read more about hell. So now I'm on the Wikipedia article reading about hell.
All roads lead back to this.
Which is also fascinating.
Yeah.
All roads lead to hell.
Yeah.
And maybe you guessed it, but then that took me to another rabbit hole. Of course, the hell article talks a lot about Satan, so I'm like, now I kind of want to click the link to go learn about Satan. And in the article about Satan, of course, there's information about the character himself, Satan, but also cultural manifestations of the concept, which, don't you know, one of those things is something called satanic ritual abuse.
Oh,
so I had to read about that.
Ties back around.
And as I was reading that, I clicked on a link that finally brought me to today's topic, the topic we've been discussing the last two and next two episodes, QAnon.
So you went on the Wikipedia for Hades, the video game, and you ended up on the Wikipedia for QAnon.
Link by link by link.
Yep. It's a good game to play. That
was such a rush of satisfying my curiosity and following connections. It took me the whole night in front of a computer, but I was hella engaged. You ever done anything like that online or on Wikipedia?
Yes, I have. I think I've talked about it many a time on this podcast. I have obviously stayed up all night several times just clicking links on the internet.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Everyone has all the time. It's like a thing. In
it's
fact, there's even like a game people play called like a Wikipedia race where they start at a random page and the goal is to get to some page by the fewest links possible.
Yep.
Which I think maybe I just won that with Hades and QAnon. I don't know.
Pretty good.
And also, that whole experience is not a small part about what this very podcast is, right? We find something and we're like, that's funny. And then we follow it down a rabbit hole, experience the pleasure of discovering something crazy that we didn't know about, share it with our audience.
That's why we do this show. Yeah.
Compelling hook. In our first two episodes about QAnon, my lovely co-host Kayla here took us on a deep dive about the history of moral panics and nocturnal ritual fantasy, which is nearly synonymous, by the way, with satanic ritual abuse that I mentioned earlier, and walked us through what exactly QAnon is and how it was birthed on 4chan and later 8chan. We also heard from conspiracy theory researcher and QAnon focuser Mike Rothschild. And in today's episode, we're going to look at QAnon from a different angle, an angle that's been a very popular topic of discussion lately. You don't have to squint too hard to make QAnon look like an ARG, or alternate reality game.
What's an ARG, Chris?
An alternate reality game, as concisely as I can put it, is a game that's played across multiple media formats, including websites, emails, and text, but also real-world systems such as phone calls and physical notes and information. It's almost always a puzzle-solving, conspiracy hunt-style narrative, and it's intended to be solved by more than one player. In fact, most ARGs are designed such that you can't really solve them by yourself.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. But actually, don't take my word for it. Listen to these clips I pulled together from a podcast I like that has extremely sexy hosts.
And you don't even have to leave to go listen to it.
I know. Check it out.
4chan is popular amongst a certain subset of internet users, largely because it can be used fairly anonymously, and there are a few rules, and like Chris said, it can get a little dirty, it can get a little dark. And the text read, "Hello. We are looking for highly intelligent individuals. To find them, we have devised a test. There is a message hidden in this image. Find it, and it will lead you on the road to finding us. We look forward to meeting the few that will make it all the way through. Good luck, 3301.
It's like that movie, The Game. The Michael Douglas movie a little bit. It's like...
But it's not.
Okay.
Just going off what you said about The Game, like there were a lot of early on guesses as to what this would end up being, and most people assumed that it was an ARG or alternate reality game.
All right, so just to recap what we've done so far. So on this message board on 4chan, on this X message board, was posted an image with some cryptic text about following some clues. And nobody could figure it out until they actually looked at the code for the image. And then in the code for the image was a URL, a link to another website.
Right.
And this other website had a picture of a duck. Got it. So,
so we can decipher them.
Basically like a Dan Brown novel,
Yup.
But online.
Yup. And again, it's not that all theorists are bad. Like, I've watched multiple videos on YouTube about, like, the crazier 3301 theories, because it's fun. Like, it's fun to pretend.
It's fun to speculate and pretend, sure. So, did any of that sound familiar?
No.
Any usual suspects there?
No, because that happened in the before time.
Yes.
This was all pre-COVID, so
right.
No.
So there are no histories pre-COVID. It's all oral. That's an oral history, though, because it's a podcast.
That's what she said.
Heyo.
Yes, of course I remember that. My favorite episode of this entire podcast, it will be my favorite episode until the end of time, talking about Cicada 3301, the cryptic internet puzzle that some folks believe is an ARG, or at least has ARG-like elements.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely has that, like...
By the way, you're not the only one. Several people have told me that is also their favorite episode.
Because it's really great.
Yeah. Because it's interesting, right? It's fun to follow that stuff.
It's fun to follow that stuff, and, like, it has all of those things that you mentioned. It has, like, phone calls and emails and internet sleuthing, and you have to band together with other people to solve it, and out in the real world, plus also on the internet.
Yeah. And it's unsurprising that we've talked about something ARG adjacent on the show before, right? Because we sort of, like I said, have this penchant for going down rabbit holes. That's kind of what we do here at Cult or Just Weird. And we're not the only ones, as we will see. Now, I say ARG adjacent because Cicada 3301 may or may not be considered an ARG, depending on who you ask. The main sticking point is that we don't really know the purpose or the designers behind Cicada. If it was purely diversionary, then I think that we could solidly say that it was, right? If somebody came out of the woodwork and was like, hey, I made Cicada and it was just for funsies,
right? Then
we'd be like, okay, that was an ARG. But without that, it's kind of like, has similar elements.
I think there's more evidence that it's not an ARG than it is, but definitely has those elements.
I agree. And some of those elements, some of those characteristics, transmedia, and transmedia basically means like across media, right? That's when we say like phone calls, emails, texts, that's what we mean. Massively crowdsourced puzzle solving, mysteriousness, and link following. As it happens, QAnon also isn't intentionally diversionary, but also shares those four characteristics.
Oh, shit.
So here's what we're going to cover on the show today. As a game developer myself, and in particular, a developer with experience designing engagement mechanics and using analytics to drive decision-making, I'll talk a little bit about game design in general and the difference between fun and engagement. Then I'll talk about a few of the more well-known ARGs. Then just to make sure we're all on the same page, and also because I promised last episode, I've got some QAnon vocabulary to cover. And then I'll be talking about some of the expert analysis and testimony that I read and gathered for this episode.
Ooh.
Turns out there's quite a few people out there that are talking about the similarities between QAnon and ARGs. So I guess like what I'm saying is this episode's topic is like a very lukewarm take. I'm like the 73rd person to talk about this.
That's fine. That's standard for us.
Yeah. But I also have some personal anecdotes, so that makes it okay.
Ooh, from the time where you got involved with QAnon and went down the rabbit hole and became a believer?
Yeah, exactly. That's my personal anecdote. Anyway, Kayla, are you ready to start going with me down these rabbit holes and jumping from connection to connection until it all makes sense?
Yes.
All right. So, speaking of personal anecdotes, here's one that I'll share that will help illustrate what game design is all about, or at least what I think it's all about. One of my favorite stories that I tell about this is when I was still working at Blizzard. One of my friends was semi-famous in the game community anyway, well-known designer for Diablo 3, and now he's worked on other Diablo games as well. So I said, okay, well, I want to learn more about game design, because at the time, I was working on the business intelligence team. So I had a lot of experience in analytics, not as much in design. I played a lot of games, but not as much experience designing them. So I wanted to say, like, where, I have the access to this expert resource. I'm going to ask him, like, what should I do if I want to learn more about game design? So I sent him this email, and he's like, oh, yeah, cool. So here's what you should do. These are my favorite books on game design. And he sent me this long list of books, and none of them were about game design.
I love that.
They were all about human psychology.
Ooh.
They were all about human motivations and psychology. There was no, like, this is the game design 101 book. It was all that. And the reason this was so insightful to me, in case it's not clear, is that it really illustrated that a game designer's job isn't about coding or mechanics or spreadsheets, fundamentally. It's about human psychology. There's no, quote, game design domain knowledge outside of that, which, okay, that's a little reductive. That's not entirely true, but this top 1% veteran game designer didn't feel like there was anything worth recommending outside of the psychology bits. So in the game design world, we talk a lot about psychological mechanisms, and are kind of expected to know a lot about things like, for example, Skinner boxes.
Right.
For our audience, a Skinner box is sort of a shorthand to talk about some of the behavioral studies conducted by one B.F. Skinner, a pioneering psychologist in the 60s.
Now, is he like a Freud where we're like, or is he like a, what?
What's
It's we all nudge, elbow, elbow. We all know that he was bullshit. Is B.F. Skinner one of those? Like, is he like a Zimbardo, or is he like a, I don't know. I don't know any legit.
I kind of know what. So I kind of know what you're asking. So
is he like legit? Like, does his stuff hold up today?
Freud was more of like a culture-just weird, where he just talked about shit and pulled stuff out of his ass.
Yeah, he
Skinner, on the other hand, did empirical studies. So he actually would sit down and do studies.
I'm saying,
that doesn't mean he's the be-all and end-all. I think so. His studies, yes. Certainly we talk about them a lot in the game design community.
Like a Skinner box isn't like the Stanford prison.
No. It's not. Yeah, it's not where it's like, oh, that's bunk bullshit. Which
that's what I was asking.
I understand your skepticism. Actually, almost certainly there are people that dispute some of the findings and conclusions, but it's not like the Milgram experiment or the Stanford experiment where it's like, that's not really valid.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's still considered, as far as I'm aware, it's still considered pretty valid conclusions. I think the most dispute I've seen with it is not along the lines of was the experimentation valid, but more along the lines of what does this say about human behavior, because the experimentation was done on rats, and people are like, human brains aren't a black box the way like rats are, where they just like something stimulus response happens.
Right.
And other people are like, no, it totally is that. And so that's the debate I've seen around Skinner.
Okay.
The Skinner box is famous enough that you've like probably got some sort of idea floating around in your head about it already. So again, as we just mentioned, it's the classic sort of rat is in a box, presses a lever, and gets a reward, right? He gets a little treat. Skinner conducted a whole slew of variants on this basic setup, and there are a lot of different takeaways, but when game designers talk about Skinner boxes, they're basically talking about this reward structure thing in their games. One of Skinner's findings, by the way, was that variable rewards were much more compelling to the rat than predictable rewards.
Ugh, this like hurts me deep.
In other words, getting a reward every time the rat hit the lever, or every 2 times the rat hits the lever, or whatever, caused him to essentially hit it less often than when it was set up to be random whether the rat got a reward or not.
Ugh.
And this experiment is often used to explain why gambling is so addictive, for example.
Yep.
Right?
That's why I check Twitter all the goddamn time, because there's not a notification every time I open it, but when there is, man, that little jolt of
that's the thing.
Serotonin is just like,
Mm-hmm. And the whole Skinner box random reward heuristic is absolutely one that game designers refer to often as well. When we design reward systems, we say, okay, well, it would be better to, like, that's why, for example, when you're killing monsters in a game and loot drops, it's much more exciting to have something drop randomly than it is if you have every single time you kill the monster, you get 10 gold. It's much more fun for it to be like,
right.
Or at least much more compelling for it to be like, well, every single time you get 1 gold, but then sometimes it gives you 100 gold and a special sword. Or
right.
Right. Anyway, wow, that was quite the tangent, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, that has nothing to do with what we're about to talk about.
Following all those information bits down the tangent tree there, link by link. But the reason I talk about it is, aside from just giving our listeners a very brief game design primer, is because it leads me to the next link in the discussion, engagement versus fun. Let's set aside the larger philosophical and biological discussions, the things that we were sort of just talking about a second ago, about whether human enjoyment and fulfillment are simply another brain reward mechanism. The fact is, even if enjoyment is just a reward mechanism, it certainly feels a lot different to a human being like myself than being just engaged. But what is that difference that I'm talking about? Well, Kayla, do you remember about a week ago when you were playing Elder Scrolls Online, which, by the way, is basically the Skyrim MMO for people that don't know. Do you remember what you said to me?
I think I said, this isn't fun.
Yeah, I walked out into the living room, you were sitting there playing it, and you're like, this game isn't fun. And this was in like your, I don't even know how many nth hour of playing.
Oh, God, I've played so much of it. I can't wait to stop.
Well, and then I was like, well, why are you playing it?
Did I say it's engaging, or did I say...
I doubt you used the vocab word.
I think I said... I don't remember what I said, but what I feel is that it's not about having fun in the game. It's just about... It's literally about wasting time. Like it's
about the loop. Right. I don't think you used the word loop, but that's what wastes your time.
It's just like, okay, I got the quest done. Okay, now I don't, like, literally, I'm not even reading any of the... I don't read what the quests are about.
Yeah.
I don't read what the quests are about.
Yeah, a lot of people don't.
I just click. Okay, next quest. Okay, I got to go get this. Got to go talk to this guy and then get this thing. Okay, now come back.
So you're caught in the engagement loop. And actually, designers call that's a very fundamental concept for game designers. They'll call it the core loop.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's a loop. There are many loops. One of them is like the core loop. Like, what is the core? I do something. I get rewarded for it. Rinse, repeat. Like, what is that about my game? And then the game can also have a bunch of others that are sort of fan out from there. But
it's almost like too much in this game because it's like every single quest storyline. Like, you'll do this intense, huge quest storyline, and then you'll go turn it in. You'll turn in like your 10th quest, and then it'll be like, okay, now go talk to this guy, rather than like ending it. That it's like that's kind of what's driving me away at this point. But like, it's like it's keeping you in it, but then like there's a separate part of your brain that wants like a fulfilling fun experience. Right. That's like, this sucks. I think the only reason why I feel that and like can tap into that is because I've played games like this a lot, and like I'm aware of this design mechanism. Right. I'm aware of what's happening. Because I work in the industry. Actually, you've worked in the industry in a writing capacity. Oh, yeah. So based on a lot of knowledge that you bring to bear to sort of like self-reflect. And so like, oh, I'm sort of being psychologically taken advantage of here. I can recognize I'm not feeling compelled to play this because it's so fun. I'm feeling compelled to play this because I'm feeling compelled to play this. Right. And that's exactly what I mean when I talk about engagement versus fun. Are you enjoying yourself? Are you experiencing pleasure and joy, maybe fulfillment? Or are you just on a reward track that keeps you coming back for more and allows you to check out? That. Now, depending on the game and the designer, you can have very different goals in the design of the game. And by the way, that's not necessarily a binary. It's more of a spectrum, as things tend to be. But some games, the binary spectrum thing there I'm talking about is the engagement versus fun thing. Right. Most games lie somewhere in between that. Now, depending on the game and designer, you can have very different goals in the design of the game. Some games and designers primarily care about giving their players an enjoyable experience. Something challenging or exciting or social or scary or triumphant or narrative or the list goes on. Typically you find this with games that have what we call a box pricing. I'm kind of getting a little bit in the weeds here, but it feels interesting. So that's what we're all about, baby. Here we go. Yeah, that's what we do is we go down these link tangents. Typically you find a more like I'm trying to deliver an enjoyable experience with what we call a box pricing model. In other words, you buy the game in a box, take it home and play it, and that's it. Right.
The more fun the game is, the more likely you are to want to buy it. And, you'll read about it in Metacritic or whatever and say, like, I need to buy this game because everyone says it's fun. It's like Breath of the Wild.
Right.
However, some games and designers primarily care about getting their players to play more, and this is what we call in the business engagement. The engagement terminology gets thrown around a lot with the businessy and analytics types in game studios, and it's much more common with games that follow the free-to-play model. In contrast to the box model, you don't just buy the game and then play it. You play it first.
Right.
And then maybe spend money on it later. You download it for free, you start playing it, and then maybe you make some microtransactions. You buy an in-game item or whatever. With these games, the longer that a designer can keep someone hooked and playing, the more likely that person is to pay you more and more money over time. So these designers tend to only, or at least primarily, care about engagement, not enjoyment or fun. As I said before, this is reductive, less of a binary, more of a spectrum, but you get my drift.
I do get your drift.
And another aside, this is why mobile games tend to have kind of a poor reputation among non-mobile players, is because mobile games, for other reasons that we won't get into, except for maybe if we have another tangent that we go put on our Patreon, tend to be mostly free to play, which means they, on average, tend to have more psychologically manipulative mechanics designed to keep you playing rather than give you a pleasurable experience. Now, let's come back out of that rabbit hole and tie it back. We touched on this whole thing ever so briefly last episode in our conversation with Mr. Rothschild, and that is that QAnon research does not have to be fun to be engaging. In fact, it can even be deleterious, it can even be tedious and still be engaging. All that's required is a reward system. And this isn't to say that QAnoners don't ever have fun or fulfillment when they're down their own rabbit holes. I'm certain that sometimes they do. It's just to say it's not a required part of the formula.
Right. I feel like I've been there too, where it's like, obviously I think that researching weird and crazy stuff is fun. And also there have been times where I've just like felt compelled to learn it, like especially when I'm like true crime or like really just the really horrific serial killers.
Right.
It's not fun to research, but it is certainly engaging.
Right. And I mean, half the time when I'm down a Wikipedia rabbit hole, like, yeah, this is fun to like learn stuff, but after a certain amount of time, it's like, whoa, what happened?
Yeah.
Why is it 3 hours later? But
and why do I feel so bad?
We aren't comparing QAnon to mobile or PC or console games. We are comparing it to ARGs. So let's go over a bit of that history for a moment.
So we're comparing it to Pokemon Go.
Pokemon Go is not an ARG, really. It
uses augmented reality.
It's augmented reality, not alternate reality. Yes.
Oh shit!
Like it happened. It shares like one or two elements in the fact that it happens in the real world and it involves like real world physical locations. But aside from that, I wouldn't say it shares much more.
Good. Pokemon Go shall remain untainted.
That's right. No, do not disparage Pokemon Go. It's the last good thing I remember. Let's mentally travel back to the year 2001.
No, that was so long ago.
It's March, and we are about 3 months away from the release of a film called AI, Artificial Intelligence.
Do you want to know what I just did in my head right there?
What?
You said, let's go back to 2001, and I was like, okay, so 15 years ago.
Nope.
No.
20 years ago. You may or may not remember the movie itself. It's a Spielberg film, but other than that, it's fairly unremarkable. It has a 74 on Rotten Tomatoes.
It's got robots, and then it ends with aliens.
I don't even think I remembered that part.
Yeah, because the aliens... I'm sorry, Mr. Spielberg, I love you.
Spoilers.
The aliens are just shoehorned the fuck in at the end.
Really? Aliens?
Yes, there's aliens.
Maybe I never saw AI.
The only reason I remember it is because of how angry my sister was.
What the hell?
Because she was like, he always does this. There's always aliens.
I think I need to watch AI as research for this.
It's because he like lives forever, and then like the aliens come. Because he's like a little AI. He like
that is not what I would have predicted that movie.
It's like weird. It's got a weird ending. Sorry, it has nothing to do with anything.
Okay. Well, anyway, that's why it has a 74 and not a 80 or whatever. I don't know. There's one thing that actually was remarkable about it.
And it was the fact that Jude Law played a robot prostitute.
That's right. Two remarkable things, what you just said. And also, if you were observant enough and reading the movie poster, you'd notice a strange credit listed with all the other normal credits. Dr. Janine Sala, who was the film's, quote, sentient machine therapist.
What? No.
Totally a job that will exist someday. I know Rocco's Basilisk will need like a whole team of therapists to help it cope with all the eternal torture.
Well, and the Jude Law sex worker character definitely needed some therapy.
For sure. But this job didn't exist back in 2001. So if you went to your favorite search engine at the time, which was probably, but maybe not Google, and search for Dr. Sala.
You're going to Ask Jeeves.
Right. You go to ask.com or what was the one that I used? Search.com?
Ew, what?
I don't even remember.
Yahoo.
Jesus Christ. If you went and searched on whatever janky-ass search engine you were using, you'd turn up the game's website. Well, hang on. Let me be clear. This wasn't an ad for the game. This wasn't a homepage for the game or a Wikipedia page for the game like I was reading about Hades. This was presented as real.
God bless.
And it was just one breadcrumb in a series. The second breadcrumb, if you count the movie poster, is the first breadcrumb.
Like, that's so inspired.
It is.
For it to be 2001 and for you to have that level of, like, internet savvy.
Like, a massive amount of, like, praise and, like, awards and stuff
for
the innovation. Yeah. So this series of breadcrumbs would lead players down many paths along their journey, which involved actually figuring out their goal and then reaching it. The goal they found was to solve the murder of one Evan Chan, a character in the 2142 world of the movie that this ARG was promoting, AI, artificial intelligence. And these many paths involved what we today call transmedia, which I've mentioned earlier in the show. So listen to all of the different media that the designers of this ARG used to deliver clues and puzzles and story to the players.
No, because it's about to make me so excited.
Trailers, print ads, posters, telephone messages.
Yes.
Live promotional events for the film.
Oh my God.
Even graffiti in public restrooms in major cities throughout the United States. Online, the game was presented through numerous websites in text, photograph, video, and audio-based formats.
Oh my God. Fucking Cicada 3 Thrones are a ripoff.
I know. Actually, a lot of them are. That's what I talk about in just a second. The ripoff's harsh, though. This ARG was nicknamed The Beast, and it's still known by that, which aside, the reason that it's called that is that an early asset list for the project contained 666 files, which prompted the game's puppet masters to call it The Beast, and then that name also sort of stuck as a nickname with the players.
Who made this?
And another aside, Puppet Master, by the way, is another industry jargon name that means basically ARG game developer. You want to know who made this?
Yes.
Microsoft.
Ew. I guess I shouldn't say that. I've been employed by them in the video game sphere.
Well, also, like, there are huge shitty corporations that do shitty things. And also corporations are large agglomerations of many, many people, some of whom are extremely creative and intelligent.
It's just when you say Microsoft, it doesn't matter what you're
referring to.
I
know. It makes it sound like the evil empire.
No, it just makes me think of nerd-ass Bill Gates. And I'm like, ew, Bill Gates made
tying
this?
it back. Bill Gates, Plandemic,
I bet that he
QAnon,
put microchips in all the people who played this game.
It was all started
I'm sorry,
at the Beast.
666 files?
Exactly.
Satanic ritual abuse.
That is a signal.
Yep.
Because the elites like to send coded signals to each other.
Yep.
Like the number of files in a game. Anyway, the entire purpose of The Beast, this giant complex puzzle, was again to promote the Spielberg film AI Artificial Intelligence. Players did eventually solve the whodunit, but it was hard. And this is a key point, actually. It was far too difficult and complex to be solved by a single player.
God, I love that.
Just like Cicada 3301, the only way to approach playing this alternate reality game was with crowdsourced community effort. We take crowdsourcing for granted now. It's part of our 2020 lexicon, but relying on this was a bit of a gamble in 2001. The word crowdsourcing wasn't even coined until 2006. But the gamble paid off, and The Beast was considered a massive achievement in game design, storytelling, and marketing. And it was hugely influential on the many ARGs that followed.
It sounds like it was a better piece of art than the film itself.
Oh, not even close, yeah.
Like, no shade to Haley Joel, no shade to
Mr.
to
Spielberg.
Jude Law, but also is not, middle of the road film.
AI was another movie.
Yeah.
The Beast was the first of a genre that it's the type of genre too where unless you come up with it, you can't conceive of it.
Whose idea was it? Like, who went, let's do this. Know. Like, whoever was the marketing team, mwah, mwah, mwah. I hope that they're just like the heads of every studio.
I hope that they have a very fulfilling sense of their life's achievements.
They probably don't even know. They probably don't even realize.
Yeah, who knows? Well, I mean, it was also a team. So Who knows where the idea came from? I feel like the idea came out of the room.
They're probably all working on Candy Crush.
That's right. Yeah, well, Candy Crush makes a lot more money.
I play all the time. It's very engaging.
Oh, yeah. That is the poster child for engagement, speaking of posters. Anyway, I said it was hugely influential on the many ARGs that followed. One such ARG that can be directly traced to influence from the beast was something called Perplex City.
What?
Perplex space city. And the reason it can be directly traced from this is that some of the players of the beast, some of that community, then went on to be ARG game designers themselves of some renown.
Yep, that makes sense. God,
I won't go into the details of it on the show today, but I want to read you a quote from one of the amazing blog posts that I read for this episode, and I will definitely link all this stuff in the show notes. The author of the blog post is Dan Hahn, himself now a veteran of ARG development. Quote, in 2004, Perplex City, one of the ARGs I worked on with my brother, I'd write ostensibly private emails between researchers from another world, illicitly using a portal to talk about shoes. Players would discover these emails by printing out the teaser website of our game, which would have entirely different content than what was shown on the screen. These clues led players to find a cache of emails that weren't meant to be discovered. End quote.
I'm leaving you.
For you, Kayla.
I'm leaving you, and I'm marrying these brothers.
And for those who have maybe listened to our previous 2 episodes, does this sound familiar at all?
I don't know, because I dissociated with how fucking awesome that was. What am I supposed to say? I really don't know.
Let me read the last sentence there
Please
again.
do, because I literally, that transported me.
I know, you were thinking about playing the game.
It got, soft lens. It was, yeah.
I know. I get it. So here's the last sentence. These clues led players to find a cache of emails that weren't meant to be discovered.
Oh, like the Podesta emails, WikiLeaks, the DNC leaks,
Boom.
Russia, if you're listening, do something about it.
So I want to take a second look at today's topic from 1,000-foot view. I think it's not enough to just say QAnon is like a game, because that's both sort of obvious at this point and well-tread territory, as I mentioned. I think the salience and usefulness of making that analogy is because it allows us to see where QAnon and other conspiracy communities like it tap into deep human psychology, tap into things hardwired in human brains. Sort of the behavioral version of describing how a chemical addiction drug works. Looking at QAnon as a game allows us to see the mechanics of how engagement is generated, in this case to a pathological degree. Okay, with that in mind, let's talk real quick about the power of the email drop. Actually, let's not talk about it. Let's quote an expert that already talked about it.
Ooh.
This is from an article written by Professor Molly, or I think they go by Moll Souter. I'll be quoting them a couple times because holy shit, the 2 articles I read, absolute intellectual gold. I think you saw me kind of my eyes rolling back in my head when I was reading these earlier this week.
You tend to do that anyway. You tend to short out when you have to read.
Yeah, well, that's true. I do hate reading, but as much as I hate words, these were excellent words. And of course,
yeah, you did. You literally were you had a hard time.
I was like, listen to this. Anyway, I'll obviously link them in the show notes.
I was trying to play Elder Scrolls, trying to get my engagement.
Check out.
You kept bringing me back.
So here's how they open their article, enticingly entitled, The Illicit Aura of Information. Quote, if a database, like an email database, is stolen or hacked by outsiders, as opposed to being leaked by insiders or extracted via the Freedom of Information Act or other legal mechanisms, and dropped, unfiltered and uninterpreted on the open web, does that change the way the information is received upon its release?
Ooh.
Would its origins and manner of release change the way the information contained within the database could be used, or the types of narratives that might be spun out of it? In this article, I say, and this is still quoting this person, I suggest that when personal, private, secret, or otherwise not public email databases are hacked and released onto the public internet without the initial mediation of established journalistic entity, these databases become the ideal medium for the growth and dissemination of successful and tenacious conspiracy theories. This is due in part to what I've called, after Benjamin, I'm not sure who Benjamin is, the illicit aura of stolen information. and the ways in which this aura cuts against norms of analysis, investigation, and interpretation, norms which professionalized journalists had until recently been in a powerful position to defend and enforce. End quote. Souter goes on to expand on these concepts in detail in the article. I will try to clumsily summarize here. Basically, there are a few things that happen when an email database gets hacked, particularly when that database is both what Souter calls professionalized and casual. So professionalized means it's like work email, and casual means it's like, hey, do you want to go to lunch tomorrow with the blah, blah, blah?
So you mean like in an email where they may be, an email account where they may be talking about like high-level election campaign stuff, and then also like, let's order some cheese pizzas.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
I mean, think of yourself. Think of all the private intra-company emails you might have sent and received over the years. What characterizes them? It's full of in-group jargon, shorthand, abbreviations, and banal casual social exchanges.
Yep.
When something like this becomes public, it's ripe for interpretation, quote unquote, because of these factors. Souter also describes the importance of how an email hack tears down the distinction between private and secret. What once was simply private information is suddenly reinterpreted as hidden information. Private? What were they hiding? Look, they're speaking in code. They must have been hiding something. They're using all this jargon. And, perversely, the more someone tries to further privatize their life in response to having parts of their life publicized, the more reaction becomes, see, they are hiding something. They must be part of the cabal.
You don't got nothing to worry about if you got nothing to hide.
Exactly. This happened, for example, with Pizzagate. There were, like, bands that, I think you mentioned this in the previous episodes, bands that had played at Comet Ping Pong.
Right.
That, like, kind of got tied up into the conspiracy theory, and they started getting harassed, and then they started, like, privatizing all of their Instagram and everything. And then people were like, look, they're going private. That means they definitely are abusing children.
I only sent them 10 death threats.
Anyway, as I said before, I highly encourage you to read this article because Molly goes into more detail and talks about stuff that I'm leaving out. And actually, there's this whole really fascinating parallel they draw between Pizzagate and something known as ClimateGate. Seriously, go read it. I almost opened the episode with talking about ClimateGate as if it was Pizzagate because of all of the parallels there are between those two email dumps.
What's ClimateGate?
We don't have time. Go read the article, or maybe we'll talk about it and put it on Patreon. All right, so let's see. We were talking about the Beast, then I mentioned Perplex City, and then Dan Hahn's description of using email dumps as game mechanics and that ARG, which led me to Molly Souter's writings about email dumps. And then that led me to another article they wrote, this one entitled The Apophenic Machine.
What's that?
Molly is very good at article titles. Apophenia is, well, apologize for sledgehammering the subtlety here, but it's what I've been doing all episode. It is the tendency to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated things.
Ooh, I do that all the time.
Everybody does. The really neat insight that Souter makes in this article is that the internet is a perfect home for conspiracies, because conspiracies and the internet both operate on the same principle, linking. The medium helps define the message, and the internet doesn't use links. The internet is links. And so are conspiracy theories.
666, the Beast, therefore Bill Gates is a satanic ritual abuser.
Exactly. Remember my admittedly contrived story at the top of the show where I was like reading about Hades on Wikipedia and then I wound up at QAnon? That is interneting right there. And it's only half a stone's throw away from what QAnoners themselves are doing when they, quote, do the research. So this Apophenic Machine article is also chock full of other awesome quotes and other insights, but I'll pick one to relate to here. Quote, humans are storytellers, pattern spotters, metaphor makers. When these instincts run away from us, when we impose patterns or relationships on otherwise unrelated things, we call it apophenia. Mm-hmm. When we create these connections online, we call it the internet. The web circling back to itself again and again. The internet is an apophenic machine.
The internet is an apophenic machine.
End quote.
It's too good. I don't have anything useful to add.
I know. You really need to read this article. It's amazing. So let's retrace our steps back again, link by link. Molly Souter, Dan Hahn, ARG design, The Beast. Ah, yes, The Beast, the first ARG. Well, first-ish. It's important to keep in mind that ARG-esque activity has been something humans have been doing for a while. Dan Hahn in his article mentions something called epistolary fictions.
I know what that is.
Which are stories written as a series of documents. I did not know what that was until I had read it in his blog post. Per Wikipedia, the usual form is letters, although diary entries, newspaper clippings, and other documents are sometimes used. The word epistolary is derived from Latin, from the Greek word epistole, meaning a letter, see epistle. The epistolary form can add greater realism to a story because it mimics the workings of real life. It is thus able to demonstrate differing points of view without recourse to the device of an omniscient narrator. So you may not have heard the term epistolary. Well, you have, but maybe our listeners haven't heard the term. I hadn't. But you've definitely heard of some of the examples, which include Bram Stoker's Dracula, Bridget Jones's Diary, and even something like World War Z, which was written as a series of like post-event interviews.
I literally just read one from 2006 to 2008 that was all on the internet, but it used different, first it was, here's a series of emails. Now, let's link to this blog post, and then that blog post links to this other blog post, and then that links to this other thing. Yep. And it was a whole story told that way.
So that's...
beautiful.
Not an ARG, but it's like, you can see that it's like the egg of an ARG.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Shout out to Eric Heiser, incredible writer, wrote Arrival.
And some folks...
I could do a killer ARG. Sorry.
No, I also love him. And some folks have even said that the marketing campaign and presentation of the Blair Witch Project was sort of a proto-ARG.
Oh, it totally was.
Not because it was necessarily like an internet puzzle goose chase, but because it was marketed with like an extremely heavy dose of verisimilitude. I personally would even argue that some guerrilla marketing techniques, which started gaining prominence as a thing in the 80s, had some very early ARG-like elements.
Like
guerrilla marketing is where you instead of just like, I'm going to put an ad on television or the radio, it's like, I'm going to do a flash mob in the middle of Grand Central Station, and it's going to be promoting Ace Bandage drink.
Ace Bandage drink.
Yeah, that's my
drink
product.
of champions.
Yeah. But I would argue that those, if epistolary fictions are the eggs of ARGs, then guerrilla marketing is the sperms of I don't know.
Did that get away from you?
A little bit, but also not really. I kind of want to stand by it. Because that's a lot of ARGs. There are a few ARGs that are self-funded, but a lot of them actually are marketing.
Right.
That's what the first one that we talked about, The Beast, was. It was marketing for a film.
Oh, so, I got wrapped up in, I've gotten wrapped up in ARGs that, I did not realize were marketing.
Yeah. That's...
the one that I just discovered. The one that was from, 2004 that I just discovered, last month was a marketing thing.
Oh, God. Which one?
It was for some random book. This person only wrote, one book, and it was about, the government building, a submarine in the Amazon.
What the shit are you talking about?
And it was this website that my friend and I found when we were, young teens, and it was this crazy website where it was I'm writing this from an internet cafe. They are going to try to find me.
What year was it from?
In 2004.
Okay, so
maybe 2003.
Okay.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't for anything big. This person wrote one book.
Oh, okay.
And it was I found this camera in the middle of the Amazon, and it has these crazy pictures on it that are going to change the world. And I'm going to release these pictures on this website. It was in 2003, on November 2003. And I remember being so freaked out by this as a kid and going back and visiting the website, And then I forgot about it. And then I never figured out what it was for until last month. And it was marketing for a book.
That is amazing that you went 16 years without figuring that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of these end up being marketing. So you might have heard of, and I don't know, some of our audience might have heard of I Love Bees.
Oh, yeah.
Which was a famous ARG that was marketing for the video game Halo 2. There was one that I didn't know about this one, but it was called The Lost Ring, and it was actually a McDonald's promotion.
Is the Monopoly game an ARG?
There's one... Oh, God. What was that one? What was the documentary we watched that was
Dirty Arches. I don't remember.
I don't know. What was it on? Was it on HBO?
HBO.
There's a really good documentary about the Monopoly game.
I don't remember what it was called.
Anyway, there was one called Potato Sack, which was marketing for Portal 2.
McFraudnals was a better title.
Blizzard did one for a release of one of their Overwatch characters. Sombra.
Oh, I remember that.
Mm-hmm. And then there's a bunch of others. I won't list all of them.
I mean, what a better way to create buzz than to get people all riled up.
Yeah, well, that's why I say guerrilla marketing, right? I think it's a type of guerrilla marketing. It's such an important and like creative type that it's become its own thing. But I think, you could categorize it as a form of guerrilla marketing. But sorry, I digress down a connection there about ARG history. Man, it's so easy to do that, isn't it?
Just links after links all the way down.
Before we go on, I did promise last episode that I'd translate some vocabulary for us.
Necessary.
A translation session didn't really fit tightly into the theme of this episode or the previous ones, but since we're starting to talk more about actual QAnon content now and not just its origins, it's kind of a good spot to do it.
I mean, it does, though, because some of these ARGs do utilize, in language. Yes, we still don't know what Cicada 3301 is, but there's definitely,
absolutely in language
jargon
for that.
There.
We just talked about in language being an important reason for why email dumps from casual, professionalized sources have power. So let's talk about some of that in language for QAnon itself. And as we've talked about many times in the show before, in-group language absolutely falls under the ritual umbrella.
Hey, guys.
It's a social signal.
Remember that we're going to evaluate this later.
And that couldn't be more... I know.
Based on our criteria.
That's going to be our 5th episode. It's a cult. It's going to last it's going to be a 3-second episode. Anyway, the reason in-group jargon is ritualized, it is a ritual, is because it's a social signal, and that couldn't be more true with QAnon. So I'll try to go as quickly as I can through these. Obviously, there's a lot of jargon. We tried to only list a few that were pretty much QAnon specific. So the first one I have is called the Storm.
We've talked about that.
Talked about that in some previous episodes. The Storm is this nebulous idea that sometime soon, TM, all of the satanic cabal elites will be arrested and executed, and it will usher in a new golden age of peace and prosperity.
And if you remember, it's because Donald Trump was taking a picture with some generals and was like, hey guys, it's the calm before the storm. And everyone went, what does that mean? And he went,
It's a turn of phrase like any other.
And then Q glommed onto it.
The next is Great Awakening. So I just mentioned the golden age of peace and prosperity. The Great Awakening is this golden age of peace and prosperity. QAnoners use terminology like I woke up or I am awake now to refer to their Q beliefs. And the Great Awakening is a golden age partly because it's when everyone else also wakes up and comes to see what QAnoners have known all along.
I think it's also it's more referring to the process of getting there. It's the Great Awakening is the process of everyone
it's like an active tense kind of thing.
Yeah, it's once everybody realizes the truth that's been hidden from them, then we can move on past the storm into the golden age.
We also talked a little bit about in the last episode adrenochrome. So this is an actual chemical produced by human adrenal glands, but to QAnoners it is also something that the satanic cabal harvests from innocent children and then consumes to prolong their life and youth.
And for its psychoactive effects. It's just a fun drug.
Ah, that's right.
It's a fun time drug.
Forgot it was fun time.
But it also makes you look really ugly and horrible.
It does everything. Right. It prolongs your life and youth, but also makes you look like a fucking wraith.
Anytime somebody ages, it's the adrenochrome. It's maybe they just have liver spots. Leave them alone.
Next is Save the Children. Speaking of children.
Or Save Our Children.
Save Our Children. So Save the Children is a hashtag that was used on Twitter until they banned it. And for those of you that don't know internet, a Twitter hashtag is just a word or phrase that you apply to a Twitter post, a tweet, to help it be searchable for people searching for something like it. Anyway, QAnoners use the hashtag partly to identify themselves and their posts to each other, and also partly to foment discussion about what the supposed cabal, child trafficking, and adrenochrome extracting ring is up to. Also associated with Pizzagate for reasons that are probably obvious if you listen to our last couple episodes. The next up is, I'm kind of combining two, is Patriot and Digital Soldier. Like Save the Children, these are also hashtags used on Twitter and ways that QAnoners like to identify themselves. QAnoners see themselves as the only true patriots, and as we talked about with Mr. Rothschild last episode, they believe that they are in a holy war for the soul of mankind, and the war they are fighting so far has been conducted online, hence Digital Soldier. It's also a way, you can't really, as Twitter, you can't ban hashtag Patriot.
Right.
So it's a way for them to get around some of these bans. Next up is breadcrumb. Breadcrumb is the jargon word QAnoners use to refer to Q drops, which again are posts that the original Q person makes on 8kun/8chan. Note how much breadcrumb sounds like something an ARG player might also say.
Do you know what QAnon researchers who interpret the breadcrumbs are then called?
Bakers, I believe?
Bakers.
That's right.
Which the analogy kind of falls apart, but yeah, it's like they take these breadcrumbs and they bake them into something that has substance.
Shouldn't it be like crouton makers?
I guess it's less about like the baking and the. It's like you just,
someone who sweeps the countertop.
You take all the breadcrumbs and you mash them together to. Make
I don't want to
like,
eat that bread.
Like an eraser, like when you like mash the Wonder Bread together.
Oh yeah. Eraser makers.
Pile of breadcrumbs.
Next up is something we've said a couple times on the episode today. Do the research, and we've mentioned it before as well. Do the research is kind of a perverted cousin of let me Google that for you.
Oh God.
Do the research is a common refrain that serves partly as, I don't have to provide any proof in my argument to an outsider, and also partly as evangelizing, i.e., they really do want you to go down that same rabbit hole that they did and become a believer, and so they say do the research.
It's also like,
part justification for beliefs.
Yeah, it's like legitimizing what they have seen on YouTube as like evidence and proof. Like they did the research.
Right. Much like wearing a lab coat makes you feel like a smart scientist without having to do anything else. Using the word research, even if that's referring to bizarre YouTube videos and cryptic messages on 8chan, lends an aura and feeling of legitimacy. So it serves a whole bunch of functions.
You're missing one.
Well, last but absolutely not least, it's my favorite one to say, which is wiggy wiggy wah.
Nobody says that. That's not how it's pronounced. It's not even pronounced.
Come on, Kayla. We discussed this on a recent GIF versus GIF episode. I don't care what anything else saying. I'm going to pronounce it the way I want.
But wiggy wiggy wah is not even how it's written.
Well, that's, GIF and GIF. That's not how that's written.
You're just
JPEG
adding
is not JPEG.
You're adding a bunch of letters.
Whatever. I'm going to call it wiggy wiggy wah as much as I want.
Why not wiggy wah?
Okay, so if you really wanted to pronounce it out...
I guess it is wiggy wiggy wah.
No, it's wiggy wigga.
Wiggy wigga. But it's also not wiggy
wigga. So here's how it's spelled, since, our readers don't actually have anything in front of their eyes right now.
Our readers?
Our listeners are not readers. So the acronym is WWG, the number 1, WGA. It's an extremely weird acronym because it combines letters and a number, but anyway, what it stands for is where we go one, we go all. Now, I don't know why they don't just say WWGO, WGA.
Because where we go number 1,
I know, but
it looks better the way that they have it.
Yeah, that's true.
It's very it's very
That's true. It's kind of like when you brand something as like Crazy Glue and you spell it with a K, and it's like, oh, that's a brand now. So here's the thing about that. It seems like a pretty basic statement of solidarity, right? So why did it turn into perhaps the most important, or at least the most widely used QAnon slogan?
Because of Roseanne Barr.
She did actually tweet that out.
In 2018.
Yep. Anyway, I wanted to know a little more about that, so I asked a new friend that we will be hearing from next episode.
Ooh.
Who, let's just say, has some direct first-hand experience with Q.
Oh my gosh.
Here's what he had to say. Quote, okay, and this is in an email, by the way. I emailed him this question. Okay, so WWG1WGA is significant because it's the first kind of unique catchphrase that Q regularly used. If I recall correctly, he was responding to someone who was lamenting that all these people in the Q team, the Trump team, etc., were doing so much, and all he could do was post memes because he was too old and decrepit to be of much use.
Oh, God.
That was a general feeling around the place at the time, so Q used the phrase to kind of console them and reaffirm that they were also helping. It also plays to the isolated social situation of many Q cultists who have been exorcised from polite society and provides them with an air of comfort. So it's kind of a mix of all for one and one for all and you are not alone. End quote.
It's so nice and horrible.
I know. It really speaks to the isolation and the hope that these people need.
We all just have no meaning in our lives.
Well,
we all just feel useless.
That's a little reductive, but yeah.
That's what it is.
So the key thing to me here that WWG1... See, come on, I'm saying wiggy wiggy, I don't care. The key to me, though, is that it is fundamentally a statement of participation.
Right.
According to my as-yet unnamed source here, its very moment of birth was inspired by participatory sentiment. So, yes, QAnon is like other moral panics of the past. Yes, it revolves around nocturnal ritual fantasy, but it is also very different. It's an extremely internet-native phenomenon. It was born on the Chan boards. gestated and spread on YouTube and social media, exists via links upon links, and it is fundamentally crowdsourced.
Do you know where it actually came from?
Oh, no. Is that not true? Is that not where it came from? It didn't come from a Q post?
He's referencing something.
What is he referencing?
So it is often in Q communities misattributed as a JFK quote, as like a quote like that was on his boat or something.
Oh, okay. So he is saying where he gave me the actual truth of where it came from, but Q communities think that JFK said it.
Oh, no, there's actually a place where it came from. According to my research, and maybe it's not correct.
Do your own research, Kayla.
It is from the 1996 Jeff Bridges film, White Squall.
What?
And it's painted on the boat or something, or it's like on the boat.
That rhymes with White Squall. Well, I think it's certainly possible that Q posted it based on, because Q, whoever is Q, which we said at the top of the show,
loves his media.
Loves movies.
Yeah.
Loves them. Loves movies. So I think it's highly likely that he watched White Squall and then said, ooh, that's good.
1996 Jeff Bridges film.
Yeah, I think that's
where it came from.
Pretty likely. Headcanon.
Not JFK.
So yeah, again, QAnon, born on Chan, spread on YouTube and social media, links upon links, fundamentally crowdsourced. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, people are starting to take notice of these aspects of it. Our take on QAnon being likened to an ARG is, again, lukewarm take at best. I'm just citing other much smarter people than myself, and a lot of people are talking about this aspect of it. I think the first place I read about it was a Washington Post article earlier this year by Alyssa Rosenberg, but there are a bunch of articles about this specific thing, QAnon as ARG, everywhere now. I read blog posts and articles by some well-known game designers, as mentioned, Dan Hahn, someone by the name of Jim Stewartson. There was even an article in Wired.com.
Jeez.
Oh, and man, speaking of linking things together, Dan Hahn has a brother by the name of Adrian Hahn.
Okay.
Who is even more well-known in the ARG community, and whose post about this very topic was A, sent to us by a listener, and B, the insights in this post inspired a lot of the direction for this episode. In fact, I found it so insightful that I said, hey, we should get this guy on the show if we can.
Oh, man.
So without further ado, would you like to hear my interview with ARG game designer Adrian Hahn?
Yes, please.
Let's get to it. First of all, thank you so much for doing this. This is, I don't know, I really geeked out about your article and I really like your work. So it's just really cool to be talking to you. And I just wanted to say right off the bat.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, obligatory baseline question. If you could just tell me your name and a little bit about yourself and your background, and feel free to plug anything you've been working on.
Sure. So I'm Adrian Hahn. I'm CEO at Six to Start. We're a games company, and we're best known for making a smartphone fitness game called Zombies Run, where you run in the real world and you sort of run to get fit, and it's kind of an audio adventure. And my background's in neuroscience and experimental psychology, and I really got into games through alternate reality games as a player first, and then as a game creator almost 20 years ago now. And so that's sort of my games part of the CV. I also do a lot of writing, and I just had a book come out called A New History of the Future in 100 Objects by MIT Press, and so you can find that online. So yeah, actually, that was my very next question. You mentioned a little bit about your background as an ARG designer. How did you decide that you wanted to be an ARG designer? How did you get into that? Oh, it was after playing what I would consider to be the first alternate reality game, which was a game called The Beast, or nicknamed The Beast, and it was a marketing promotion, really, for Steven Spielberg's movie AI. And, it's like, why do you want to make movies? Why do you want to make video games? It's because I played a game that I found just really fascinating and really exciting. And after playing it, I really wanted to see what I could do myself. And that wasn't super straightforward because, for various reasons, alternate reality games are they're not big business, really. So there weren't a lot of companies hiring. I kind of had to invent the position myself.
That's awesome. That was a part of your blog post I liked a lot, where you sort of talked about your background with that and how you created the walkthrough and sort of that led to your time making Perplexity. So can you tell me a little bit more about the ARG that you designed, Perplexity?
Yeah, so this was a fairly early ARG in the grand scheme of things from the early 2000s. And it was unusually, it wasn't like an advert for a TV show. It wasn't an advert for a movie or a game. It was a completely brand new story. And it lasted for about a year and a half. And basically the goal, more or less, was to solve a whole set of puzzles that would lead you to a treasure worth $200,000 buried somewhere in the world. And we created this whole alternate reality internet, like a portal to a world that was obsessed with puzzles, like a parallel universe that was obsessed with puzzles. And the way we made money through it was by selling puzzle cards, like Pokemon cards that you would get in newsagents or online, and each of those would have a puzzle. And so it was a kind of unusual thing because it was a self-funding ARG. Most ARGs are promotional campaigns, like I said, and so that was kind of my first job. It was such a bizarre experience, and we gathered a really interesting group of players, and it was pretty early on, in the days of the internet and social media. So, for example, when we posted a job advert in code in a magazine, people thought we were MI5 because they just thought, wow, this is obviously like some code breaking task. And it was actually a really easy puzzle. And yeah, so that was a project that I worked on for a while. And it really just showed me how communities could come together to process theories, to solve puzzles incredibly quickly. It was a very kind of exhausting game to make because unlike, your usual console games where you sort of make it all and then you release it, we were making it as we were releasing it in real time. And so I don't think I could really take more than a year and a half of making this. But people love playing it. That was how I cut my teeth on games.
Until I said it out loud just a second ago, I didn't get the so for our listeners, it's Perplex space city as in like town. And I just got the connection that it's also Perplexity. That's clever. I didn't get that till just now. I have to ask you about getting sideswiped by the Cicada 3301 conspiracy theorists, because we did an episode on our show last season about Cicada, and it's like one of our most popular episodes. So would you mind telling our listeners that anecdote?
Well, we, Six to Start, my company, before we started making Zombies Run, we used to do a lot of work for companies like the BBC and Disney and Channel 4. We would consult and design projects and even run games for them. And one of the games we did just before making Zombies Run was for a TV show, a documentary called The Code. And this was a 3-part show about how we can understand mathematics by looking at the natural world. So looking at things like the Fibonacci sequence and prime numbers and golden triangle and things like that. And it was pretty conventional. We did a whole treasure hunt around it because the BBC really wanted to bring the documentary to a younger audience. And one of the things that the TV show covered was prime numbers, and it was cicadas because there's a sort of link between the gestation period of cicadas and prime numbers. And that I have nothing to do with that. I mean, that's just something, it's a pretty obvious topic for a TV show to cover. And so I saw the script and I was like, oh yeah, that sounds good. Maybe we should reflect that in the game somehow. And I can't remember quite how it happened. But anyway, a few years later, people just drew the connection somehow between the fact that I was an alternate reality game designer and some people thought Cicada 3301 resembled an ARG, which it sort of does. I mean, in the sense that it has puzzles and it's weird and no one really knows what it's about. And I had made a game that contained cicadas. Therefore, sure, maybe Adrian designed Cicada 3301. And I mean, that's not a lot of evidence, really. It's pretty spurious. But then this sort of documentary crew came over and they just wanted to talk to me about it and about alternate reality games. And they put it to me that, oh well, doesn't it look suspicious that you did this game? And at the time, this was like long before Trump and QAnon and stuff like that. I was like, it's funny, I'll go along with the joke, sure. I didn't say I did it. I was just like, well, no, I didn't do it. But obviously now in 2020, people are more keen on drawing those connections where they didn't exist. And so, fairly frequently, I get DMs or emails from people saying, hey, do you know Cicada 3301? Did you make it? Do you know Satoshi? Just like when you start making, if you make enough alternate reality games, people just assume you're involved in every conspiracy theory, which is, I know a lot of people in ARGs, and I'm pretty sure that's not the case.
Yeah, apologies in advance if mentioning it on the podcast here has any effect that makes it worse. Our audience is pretty rationally skeptical though, so hopefully this won't exacerbate that problem. But I just thought it was a funny story, and it did seem a little bit like you mentioned just a second ago, like Q drop-ish, right? Yeah. People wanting to take this totally unrelated thing and then draw that connection to something that they're already speculating about. That's interesting. So speaking of QAnon, let's get into that. The first thing I want to talk about is, so it feels like QAnon and the Chan boards more broadly occupy this weird sort of like Schrodinger's cat space where they're like both serious and unserious, both real and unreal at the same time, which imparts like a ton of plausible deniability power to them and also makes the content super compelling. So I really like the part where you talked about the power of TINAG. Am I pronouncing that correctly? TINAG?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we normally say it out loud, but TINAG or TINAG, yeah.
TINAG, yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the power of that in ARGs?
So TINAG stands for "This is not a game," and it is this motto that players and designers, some players and designers, try to adhere to when playing a game and making a game, which is to say that the game should not acknowledge that it is actually a game, right? And that's kind of true of most stories. Like when you're reading a book or watching a movie, they usually don't break the fourth wall. I mean, like Deadpool, for example, it does break the fourth wall, and some books do break the fourth wall by addressing the reader. And if Jane Austen does that, but most books try not to do that. And I think with alternate reality games, because they were a new kind of entertainment and they're using the internet in a new way, they felt much more immersive. So a good example would be The War of the Worlds, when Orson Welles made his radio production. That was kind of like, this is not a radio show, If you tuned into it after the disclaimer at the start, you'd be like, oh my God, it sounds so convincing. Aliens are invading New York, right? And he's trying to make it really immersive. And so similarly, and that worked, by the way, because radio was fairly new at the time, and people kind of weren't used to everyone just lying, all the time, or just like, making stuff up, just storytelling, right? And alternate reality games are storytelling using the internet, using the real world. And it's more fun, right, for everyone if you just pretend that this is not a game. So if you sort of try and sort of get on with it in the same way that if you're playing a LARP or if you're role-playing in an MMO or in Dungeons and Dragons, you try not to sort of break out of character. It is more fun if you do it that way. And I think the reason why that is relevant to QAnon is because QAnon is almost like this is not a conspiracy theory, except you apply it all the time, right?
Right.
If that makes sense, with alternate reality games, the game sort of balloons to being, because you can get phone calls or you can meet actors, it balloons to the size of the entire world, maybe, if the game is big enough. And so does QAnon. And so while I think it might be more possible to sort of compartmentalize being into UFOs or being into, aliens or whatever, and not having that really affect the rest of your life, with QAnon, it kind of does, because it's so widespread and because people's interaction with social media is much, much deeper.
Right. And as you mentioned in your blog post as well, like the stakes are so high with this that it compels people to action where it might otherwise not. And I think absolutely. The sort of the genesis of Q and QAnon on the Chan boards feels very this is not a game to me, right? Like the genesis of how, the original posts were sort of, is this real? Is this not? There was, it was one of many of a sea of posts about whatever conspiracy theory or like whatever crazy thing. And it was always a little tongue in cheek, right? It was, oh no, this isn't real, until it was, right? And then Q just happened to be the one that gained the momentum. And then it took on this sort of like, this is not a game until it's completely like that, like you said, all the time. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And I think that it is really, I think it's easier than it sounds to slip from pretending something is just a game and treating something as a game, and then having the incentive, social incentive to treat it as if it's real. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So on the show, we talk a lot about closed logical loops and motivated reasoning. So I really liked this section of your article. It was entitled, quote, "It's like we did it on purpose." Because I think that section had a lot of explanatory power, not only for QAnon, but also for cults in general. So can you talk a bit about how ARG developers are able to solve inconsistencies and mistakes by going through rather than around, so to speak?
Right. So when we're designing these games, we're often doing it in real time. The alternate reality games are so big and they last for so long, you can't really make all the content in advance. And it's better if you try and be reactive to what the players like. In the same way that a good TV show or soap opera will notice that, oh wow, the audience really like these two characters, we should write them some more episodes. So we're writing this stuff in real time. And if you're writing in real time, you're going to just make more mistakes. And so we make mistakes and we get people's names wrong. We use a wrong name on a web page, or we have the wrong solution for a puzzle. And because everything else is otherwise so kind of crafted in the world we've created, and there are clues there, people just sort of assume that those mistakes we've made are in fact clues, or they're just real. And so rather than us coming out from behind the curtain, as it were, and saying this is not a game and we messed up and please can you ignore this mistake we made on this webpage and right. And just pretend we didn't do that, or just replace it. We might go and say, oh, okay then, well, I guess we'll go with what we made a mistake of and we'll just rewrite this part of the story and we'll try and get back on track as soon as we can. And sometimes that is really annoying and frustrating, and sometimes it actually results in a better story than otherwise, especially when players come up with a theory of how the story should go, where we look at it and think, oh yeah, that kind of does make more sense or it's more exciting than what we were planning to do. And so I think that, again, where that sort of becomes interesting, for QAnon, is that you don't really have kind of mistakes because there's enough writers, there's enough people in the community who can just write around it and say, oh, well, yeah, I suppose it's true that this event that we predicted didn't actually happen, but here's like 100 reasons why that didn't happen, mm-hmm. and we can just, it doesn't, and this is why I think it's really important for people to understand it's really, you can't really disprove this sort of conspiracy theory. You'd be like saying, oh, well, you said that Trump was going to do X, Y, Z, or that Hillary Clinton was going to get arrested and now he didn't. And so therefore, I guess you're going to stop believing in QAnon. I'm like, that's not a sort of logical position they got themselves into. Mm-hmm. And so there is like motivated reasoning to figure out why to sort of preserve the wider belief.
Right. Yeah. It's really interesting how I never tied that. Actually, I guess I didn't really know about that part of ARG development before I read it in your blog post about how you fix those mistakes by writing around them and incorporating them, and then drawing that parallel was really interesting because QAnon, it feels like it's this, and other conspiracy theories and cults in general feel like they have sometimes this self-healing mechanism, right? It's like this self-healing tapestry of story. And any mistake is always just explained as, oh, that's even more proof of the conspiracy theory because listen to why it happened. I found your conclusion about QAnoners being sort of like an infinite source of their own content fascinating. Would you say QAnon is to developed ARGs like what Wikipedia is to curated encyclopedias? Like, is it just 100% user-generated ARG, or is that oversimplifying?
I don't think it's oversimplifying. I mean, I think there are parallels, but I wouldn't call QAnon an ARG because because it's not really designed as entertainment, even though it sort of is, and it doesn't have a single author, whereas every other alternate reality game does have a single author. But the way in which people consume it and the way in which people solve it, I think, are similar. What is unique about QAnon is that so much of it is user generated, but there's different tiers of users, as there are for Wikipedia. I mean, it's not like there are 20 million editors or of Wikipedia. There's like a billion people who read it, but there's a very small number of people who actually create substantial amounts of content. And similarly with QAnon, most people are experiencing it through memes or just links that are shared, through social media. They're not like sitting there writing 1,000 words a night. There are some people, obviously, who are making really elaborate videos like Plandemic or whatever, or they're making, memes, or they're doing podcasts or things like that. But that's a very small proportion, I think, of the QAnon community. And that's a similar thing of the internet, like the sort of 80-20 rule of like creators, or the pyramid of like creators. And so I think that it is, though, I think it's more a case that the tools that we use to create ARGs and for people to play ARGs effectively, these are tools like wikis, user-generated wikis and mailing lists and social media and Google Sheets and things like that, have now been democratized to the extent where they can be used by casual believers in conspiracy theories, right? And so these tools existed, but they're quite hard to use 20 years ago, and now they're really easy to use. And so that's why you're seeing, I always thought, that's why you're seeing conspiracy theories and other things using these tools. I mean, it's not like super sophisticated, let's be clear, like if you look at the memes and it's just videos and just forums and stuff, they're not using augmented reality or virtual reality or something. It's just internet stuff. But even those tools provide a very different experience and manifestation of conspiracy theories, which are kind of scarier, I guess, in their novelty than they have been before, certainly faster. And I think it really goes to the heart of, the future is here, it's just not equally distributed, like William Gibson said. With ARGs, the future was here, just most people didn't have it now, and now everyone kind of does have it, and everyone's playing conspiracy theories.
Right. Yeah. And then the way that allows the community to solve that content problem, right? The eternal thirst for content problem by being entirely user generated is interesting. It gives it just sort of an infinite runway. Yeah.
I mean, QAnon is interesting because it has, absorbed all other conspiracy theories. I mean, that's sort of, when I was like a teenager, I don't want to make this sound like condescending, but like when I was a teenager, I was like into conspiracy theories. I was like, wow, what if UFOs and aliens were real? Like I was on BBSs and downloading weird FAQs, and I even got the Heaven's Gate stuff before that all hit. And it's just interesting. It's just kind of like, it's a cool story to believe it's true. It's cool to sort of think that you have access to secret information. But the thing was with those conspiracy theories is that you'd read the FAQ or the text file, and then you'd be like, all right, well, I'm done now, because there's no more. No one's making more of their stuff. Right. They're not discovering aliens every hour. Whereas with QAnon, it is about the world, and it's about the media that we can all see. And there is enough media out there that looks slightly weird, or you can easily doctor, that you can be part of the living, breathing conspiracy theory with new information every minute of every day. In the same way that cable news went 24/7, conspiracy theories can go 24/7. It just took a little bit longer.
Yeah, right. And so that segues me a little bit to the next question. You talked a bit about how QAnon thrives in sort of this environment where there's like a lack of information and trust in certain institutions, and you combine that with this age of Google where everything feels like it should have an answer immediately. And when it doesn't, then it creates this sort of vacuum where people want to go in and create those answers, or go in and quote, do the research and find that. Can you talk a little bit about the environment, the sort of lack of trust, lack of information environment
Well, I think that's a really good juxtaposition you presented there, where people are used to using search engines, and by that, it's really Google, to just like type in what is the capital of Malaysia, and getting the answer straight away. What is 500 milliliters in fluid ounces? You get the answer, and I think people aren't very comfortable with uncertainty or nuance. And that's not new. That's always been the case. And normally we just haven't really had to deal with it, because we haven't been exposed to it. You can see that with, COVID-19 now, where people are like, well, should we wear masks? They don't work perfectly, so therefore I'm not going to wear them. And it's like, well, it's complicated. They're better than nothing, but they're not gonna stop the virus 100% on their own. And I think that people want those answers. And I think also, when it comes to trust, the truth is that we know the governments have, there have been government conspiracies. I mean, real government conspiracies, and there have been cover-ups, and there have been governments doing awful things. And I'm sure a lot of them haven't been revealed. And a lot of them are frankly kind of more awful than QAnon, that the British government covered up evidence of massacres, in the colonies. It's an awful tragedy. And so in that context of the fact that we know that authorities have covered up things and they still aren't really admitting to it, it is easy for people to think, well, if they've covered that up, then maybe people in Washington, D.C. are doing child trafficking, right? Because they don't have that trust. And so I'm not saying that therefore, well, go with God and believe everything you hear. What I am saying, though, is that, of course, people, there are some people out there who just simply just don't trust what the government says at all, or authorities. And I think that is understandable for politicians wanting to kind of save their own skins. But, the erosion of trust in governance and authority, not even authority, in institutions, as a whole, is just really damaging, because it means that people just don't believe anything.
Right.
And so I think that, and this is a pretty common refrain, I think that the only way you really get around issues, like conspiracy theories like QAnon, is by trying to restore trust in institutions. And, I guess authorities, but hopefully these are democratic authorities, right? Hopefully these authorities or institutions that has somehow elected, rather than just, some dictatorship.
Right. Yeah. I've seen that stated elsewhere too, where folks that get into conspiracy theories don't get out of them by presenting information. They get out of them by their situation changing, and by situation I mean like getting a different friend group, or connecting with people more, or having more trust in XYZ, and then like that's the thing that turns them around, much more than saying like, oh well, adrenochrome's not real, duh, like that won't do it. But changing their situation will. So you mentioned in your article a bit about gamification for good. You mentioned like the COVID tracking project, which we will link to in our show notes. What makes a community like that, or we mentioned Wikipedia, what makes those communities good and reliable curators of information, and QAnon not?
Well, I think that with COVID tracking project and Wikipedia, to an extent, there is a deep commitment to showing your work openly and showing your sourcing very clearly, and having that be documented, in a really transparent way. It's probably the most important thing, and to a fault almost, in Wikipedia, where it's like a citation needed. I mean, that's a joke, Wikipedia, right?
Right.
And so you can't write anything there without saying, well, here's where I got it from. And that doesn't mean where you got it from is perfect. It's more just like, well, we could try and track it back, right? And that's a difference. So anyone can edit COVID tracking. Well, that's not true of COVID tracking, but anyone can edit Wikipedia. The COVID tracking project, you can volunteer to be part of that and help input data. And you can probably try and like falsify data there if you wanted to, but it would be really easy for people to find out if you were doing that, because it would be tagged against your user, and people will be able to look back and say, okay, well, just let's revert this person's changes. And similarly in Wikipedia, you could find that out. Whereas in QAnon, there's a much greater degree of full anonymity. which is different from pseudonymity. You don't need to be in Wikipedia. You don't need to provide your real name, but you do need to have a stable identity. You can't just be some completely anonymous user all the time, or you can, but it wouldn't. It seems a bit pointless and it wouldn't go well. And so QAnon, there's not really accountability for your claims, right? And also, there's not really a culture, I think, of saying, well, here is the clip that I got from CNN at timestamp 3:14, on this day, and you can see that it is exactly the same clip, and I did not doctor it, right?
Right.
Which is not to say that I'm sure not everything that's in QAnon is doctored. I'm sure there's just weird video clips anyway, but that is really at the heart of these citizen journalism projects. If you are going to let everyone contribute, which is really good, because I think you get a lot more work done if you have more people pulling, but also it's fulfilling. People like contributing. People like being valuable. Even if I'm working on Wikipedia and I only contribute 10 words and this other person has contributed 10,000, I still feel like, oh yeah, I did something. I'm a Wikipedia contributor. And so that's really important, to the project. And that's why I think that even though it might, on the one hand, you kind of think, well, do we really need COVID tracking projects? Shouldn't we just get the government to do this? And then we don't have to worry about all this tracing stuff. It's like, no, it's a good thing for people to be involved. I think it results ultimately in a better product. It might require more work, but it makes people happier because people want to do things and they want to feel valued. And they feel valued as part of QAnon, which is not a great place to be. But they also feel valued as part of Wikipedia. Although Wikipedia has its problems as well with the whole Scots Wikipedia thing. But anyway.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, actually, we just mentioned the Scots Wikipedia thing. Last question I have for you is totally optional. We just ask everyone this. Is there anything we didn't cover that you want to talk about, you'd like to say to our listeners? Doesn't even have to be about QAnon or ARGs, just anything you'd like to say.
Well, I'm part of this whole blog post that sparked this off is because I'm writing a book about gamification, which it probably won't come out for at least another year or two. But I'm really interested in the way in which companies and government and people are creating games that try and govern our lives. And some of them are to kind of make your life better. We try and make, fitness games to make exercising more fun. And some games are made by companies like Amazon or Microsoft or Uber or call centers to basically make you work harder for less money, fundamentally. And some games are made by governments, as propaganda or as sort of control. And people are thinking about the world in terms of games. They sort of talk about experience points and leveling up. And so I think, the culture of games has really seeped into everything we do. And so that's something that I'm really interested in. That's part of why I wrote this post comparing QAnon to an ARG. And I think there's a lot more other comparisons out there that I really hope to get into.
I'm fascinated by gamification and human motivation and that just the whole obviously as a game designer myself. So I'm really looking forward to your book, I guess is what I'm saying, because I find that I'll keep an eye out, and so should our listeners. In the meantime, our listeners should also go download Zombies Run, because Zombies Run is very cool, and it's an example of what you were just saying, sort of a gamification of fitness. So again, I really appreciate your time. I just loved your blog post, and I went back and read the Twitter thread and everything. So it was very one of those things where after you read it, you're like, oh yeah, of course. But it's still, I hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah, of course. It was very, very insightful, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I'll stop gushing now so you can leave.
Okay, well, thanks a lot.
So the blog post that we mentioned a whole bunch of times at this point now is called What ARGs Can Teach Us About QAnon by Adrian Hahn. We'll definitely link it in the show notes, but if you want to go search for that right now, go for it.
Stop the podcast. Go read this blog post.
Unsubscribe from our podcast.
And then listen to another podcast, and then watch a movie. Go watch White Squall, and then come back.
No, yeah, it's What ARGs Can Teach Us About QAnon. So if you want to go find it. So Kayla.
Yeah.
What do you think ARGs can teach us about QAnon? Now that we have listened to that together.
Well, I don't feel the need to answer that question because I feel like that question has been thoroughly answered by Mr. Adrian Hahn. However, I just want... Tinag is...
I love it.
My favorite thing.
Yeah.
And it's like...
I've used it like a whole bunch now ever since.
Yeah, I know
the first time right, we live together. First time I read about it was actually in his blog post, which is surprising because I like ARGs and I'm a game designer, but maybe I'm not quite the fanboy as you are a fangirl since you love Cicada so much.
I've never heard that phrase either. I've encountered it in the wild for sure, but I've never heard that acronym.
Yeah, and I think it's so apt for...
Or is it Tinag?
Oh, God. Why do we keep referencing the fucking GIF episode?
This is not a shame.
It's to me, it's so compelling because it's, as you were saying this in your, I think, second at one of your episodes, I lose track. One of the previous 2 episodes, you were saying how the way QAnon started was it was in this milieu of other posts that was happening on 4chan at the time that was like CIA Anon and other guy Anon, and it was all just sort of this weird... Oh, we're playing pretend here. We're talking about top secret stuff. And QAnon was just, the Q post was just part of that. And then it kind of took on a life of its own.
Right.
And, I talked about this with Adrian, but it's also interesting how when you shine a light on this stuff and you ask somebody about it, there's always this weird element of like, oh, well, I mean, you don't take that seriously, do you? I'm like, I don't know. I thought you did. I'm like, I mean, yeah, not all of it. So there's always this like weird duality.
And I think that duality is part of what's so compelling. Like it's something that does come up with us over and over where it's like, we talk about some of the crazy beliefs that these various groups have, not just QAnon, but like these various cult beliefs and how we talk about like, it's fun. It's fun to think those things. Yeah. And like, that's what I see. Like I see Tinag in places that aren't just QAnon and aren't just ARG. Like it's a really big part of the No Sleep subreddit. Like the No Sleep subreddit is where people write scary stories, and there are some incredible scary stories. Again, Eric Heiser got to start there. Shout out to a really great writer.
This is the Eric Heiser episode.
But there are some incredible stories on there, and one of the like rules, quote unquote, is that everybody is coming to No Sleep. You're bringing to it the like not tongue in cheek, but like the Tinag, like. Yeah. All of these stories, you're kind of supposed to read them as if they are true, while we all know that they're fictional stories.
Right.
And it's like...
Fargo, the TV show, does that. Like every episode, they start with, this is 100% true. And for a while, it like wigged me out. I'm like, is it? But it definitely gives it just like an extra... It's like an extra little spice on the
It's the
recipe
character
of...
Michael Scott. It's like when that character...
You're just saying that because you're watching The Office again.
Yes, but also...
Speaking of engagement, by the way, how many times have you watched that series?
It's definitely an addiction. It's like when there's a character who you're like, I can't believe that this character's real, and then they have a moment of acknowledging that they also aren't real. It would happen in On Becoming a God. Like, that's a really... There's something that is really engaging about that concept to people, and I think really it's just because I think it creates... fun, not engagement.
Yeah,
not necessarily engagement. It creates
puts
fun.
your brain in a different mindset. Like it puts you in a different mindset of consuming the content.
Right.
Like if I were to read ghost stories from No Sleep, and in the beginning of every ghost story, somebody said, "Disclaimer: this story definitely didn't happen because ghosts aren't real, and you're dumb if you think ghosts are real. Anyway, enjoy." Then I would be like, I don't enjoy that now.
Right.
So there's there's certain stories, there's certain things where it's like you kind of have to have that element of suspended disbelief.
It's part of why urban legends are so powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, literally while we were taking a break from recording this episode, I was on Reddit reading
of course, that's
thread.
why you brought it up.
I wasn't reading No Sleep, but I was reading a thread of like, what's the scariest true story that like happened to you? And of course, as I'm reading it, nobody's saying like, this is an urban legend or this is just something I'm making up. But there's a ton of stories where I'm like, okay, this is clearly fake. But it's way more fun to believe that they're true.
Right. I mean, we talked about Blair Witch earlier in the episode. That was a huge deal when Blair Witch came out. It was supposed to be like, oh my God, this actually happened.
Right.
This is found footage, and now found footage is a genre.
Right. And there's something about like for all of our skeptic brains that even when it's like, okay, I know this is fake, but what if? Like,
right.
That's also
There's
very
like this way to compartmentalize that, yeah.
Like, what? It could be true. It
could
be.
Right. What would it be like if it was? I thought it was also interesting. He talked about his psychology background.
Yeah, of course.
So we mentioned that earlier in the show, and that very much tracks with the list of recommended books I got from my friend. I thought it was also interesting when he talked about how people were like, man, they just made the connection that I talked about cicadas once, and I'm an ARG designer, and it connected. That's exactly what we're talking about in this episode, is that's Apophenia right there.
That's literally finding those connections that do not exist. Yeah.
And then I also thought that his like citation needed example was kind of, obviously everything he talked about was salient, but in this it was about, it feels like citation needed is almost the like weird converse of do your own research. So if you're going on Wikipedia, it's like if you can't say a damn thing without saying here's exactly where I got it.
Right.
In this weird, perverse, converse, opposite mirror universe way, when a QAnoner says, do your own research, that's also them saying, I'm not citing my sources. Go find it yourself. Like if Wikipedia said that, like, I'm going to say all this stuff. Well, what's your source? Go find it yourself.
But like what?
That would be a lot less compelling.
At what point are you not compelled to cite your sources? You know what I mean? Like at what point, like when does citation needed turn into let me Google that for you?
I mean, this is a whole nother rabbit hole, so I don't want to talk about it too much, but I think the whole like let me Google that for you thing is a hard question. I think there's like some gray area there, and sometimes things are on one side of the line, sometimes something isn't. I do think that I frequently do have a problem with that statement.
Bitch, you're the one who's always saying, let me Google that for you.
Yeah, because I'm an asshole. Look, I'm not saying it's never right to say that. What I am saying is if somebody says, okay, well, prove what you're saying, and I say, well, let me Google that for you, then I haven't done my job to convince them. Right? If I actually want to change your mind, I need to I need to say, here is why what I am saying is true.
Right.
That is a logical, rhetorical thing that has been always like from the beginning of time. Like I need to prove my assertion to you. So, I know that it's weird because we're in this internet age of like, if I make an assertion on Twitter, I can't explain to 5,000 people who all say like, prove it. I can't explain it individually to each one of them. So I understand the let me Google that for you stance, but I don't know. I also think that sometimes it's inappropriate. And well, it's not that it's inappropriate. It's that if you're saying that to me, then you haven't done your job to convince me, and I don't have to believe what you have to say.
So it's not that like if you make an assertion on Twitter, you are automatically obligated to like prove it. But if you don't do that, and if you choose not to do that, which is valid, it is then also not the person asking for the proof is also not obligated to believe
exactly. You as the explainer don't owe me proof, but I as the listener don't owe you belief. That's what it comes down to. To me.
You hear that, QAnoners? In your research.
COVID tracking project also, I just want to say, is just super glorious. I know COVID is horrible and everything is horrible, but the COVID tracking project, like Wikipedia, is a real achievement in what motivated, smart, correctly crowdsourced people can do. It's sort of like an anti-QAnon, right? It's really awesome. So I'm glad he brought that up too. Yeah. Anything else about my little chat with Mr. Hahn?
It was a pretty good chat.
Thanks. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say here, which maybe this is kind of tying us into the rest of the episode, is how he talked about QAnon is not a game, but the tools are the same.
Yeah.
And that was something we've sort of already mentioned, like I said, in this episode. And I kind of want to close with talking about that a little bit too. The purpose of this episode is not just to say that QAnon is like an ARG, but to say that QAnon uses a lot of the same psychological tools that games do. And especially games like ARGs, which, like QAnon, live on the internet. And like some games, apps, and Facebooks, which I won't mention here, QAnon is not alone in being an extremely unhealthy engagement activity. We all know about the Facebook algorithm problem, right? We all know about how apps try to keep you on their app by using these psychological techniques. So this is like a very ubiquitous Internet 2.0 age problem that we have. And QAnon, as shitty as it is only one thing that suffers from that.
Right. And I feel like the only way to healthfully use some of these things is to not use them. Like, I think the only healthy way to use Facebook is to not use it.
Just to get it out of your life.
I think the only healthy way to use QAnon is to not.
I mean, unless you're following Culture Just Weird. That's healthy?
Very healthy.
Otherwise, nothing else is, really.
No.
Yeah.
I deleted my Instagram.
Yeah, get off Facebook. Don't just listen to our show. Don't follow us on Facebook.
You can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram.
You can if you want.
I deleted my Instagram. You know what I saw Instagram did recently?
What did they implement tweets? Because Twitter implemented Instagram.
Twitter implemented fleets. I saw somebody post an image, and I didn't verify this because I don't have Instagram anymore. Somebody posted an image of the Instagram update, and where the like button used to be. So you're scrolling Instagram, and you can hit the little heart to like an image. The new update has moved the heart image, and where the heart image used to be, where the like button used to be, is a shopping icon.
Oh, that is so wrong. Again, example of exploiting a psychological thing that people are used to interacting with your UI in a certain way.
Yep.
And now accidentally I'm going to push the buy something button.
Now I'm going to shop.
So anyway, clearly QAnon is not the only thing that is competing nefariously for our attention online. It is a complex problem with complex solutions, and we'll talk about some of those. I think Mr. Hahn talked a little bit about that. Restoring trust is one of those multifaceted, one of those facets of the multifaceted solution that we'll need to stuff like this. But hopefully with this episode, we've at least gotten another angle on understanding the complex problem today.
Sounds good.
My name is Chris.
No.
No?
Wait.
It's not?
It's not.
My name is... What is my name?
I just want to react to that. I don't know.
You cannot react, Kayla. That is not your... Oh, it's literally your job.
Well, actually, I guess I just want to have a postscript.
Oh, well, we'll go ahead and PS me.
Since we opened this episode with an update of the current state of affairs.
Oh.
I feel like it's important that we state that we have some breaking news that updates.
Are we going to turn into like a 24-hour news cycle podcast here now?
Oh, just because I'm pretty sure you mentioned her by name at the very beginning of the podcast.
I mentioned Jen Ellis. I didn't mention Sidney Powell.
Well,
no, mate. Maybe you did. I don't know.
One of us did.
That was so long ago. That was 3 hours ago.
One of the lawyers, one member of the legal team that is levying these lawsuits against various states to have various votes challenged in the election, blah, blah, blah. One of those, that legal team member, Sidney Powell, has since been distanced from the campaign.
Yeah, they made some statement basically saying, like, she's doing her own stuff. I don't know what's going on.
Because apparently she made too many, like, crazy claims.
But it's, like, so bizarre because the statement says it's basically like, I don't know who this person is. Like, if you read the statement. But, like, the past 2 weeks, she's been, like, appearing with Giuliani and the whole crew and their appearance. It's like... It's gaslighting. What do you mean you don't know who this person is? There's a tweet from the National GOP...
There's a tweet from the president.
...committee that says, like, good job, Sidney Powell. We'll get him. Like, it's just... All, what are you talking about?
It's all part of it. It's all part of the storm.
There's receipts from, like, a week ago.
It's like what Mr. Hahn talked about in the interview. There's no mistakes. There's just things to write through.
No, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right.
All clues.
That's exactly what it is. It's like, oh, no, that's part of it.
So it'll be interesting to see what this little clue
turns out
to be.
Yeah.
And we'll give you that update next time.
Oh, man. I mean, between now and 2 weeks from now, though, a million things will happen. So I don't know.
True.
Thanks, 2020.
I'm Kayla.
And I actually am Chris.
And this has been...
Cult or Just Weird.